Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Bixley Tech Tuesday. Today, Cris and Andrew are taking on the topic of your end users are your UX experts. They talk about the difference between UI and UX, and we also talk about the huge importance of getting your MVP in front of your end users so you can start iterating and get that UX feedback from the actual people who will be using your app. It's a great conversation, so I hope you enjoy.
UX stands for user experience, and it's really all about how the user interacts or how they feel when they're interacting with your product or your software. UI is user interface, and so that's really more about the specific elements, typographies, colors, fonts, things like that. So that's more about the visual appearance and less about the experience.
It's important to have those conversations, especially when you're dealing with an MVP, because a lot of times an MVP is connected to a budget, and usually a much smaller budget than the larger project. So if you're creating an application that has a very rough user experience to it, that may work for an MVP because you're trying to keep your budget down, but you need to have those kind of conversations with the client. Otherwise, they're going to get something on the other side that feels very juxtaposed into how they may do their day-to-day work routine, which is not going to feel like a very useful MVP to them because it's causing a barrier to them to continue to do their daily work. However, if you let them know, listen, these key elements from a interface standpoint are going to let you specifically click here, and it's specifically going to look like this, and kind of at least have the conversation of the UX is going to be terrible, and they understand that, then it's a very valid MVP and completely works. And that's not to say you can't have good UX on an MVP. You can, but I think it's why it's important that you talk about it.
Yeah, the MVP too is really all about gathering user feedback so that we can iterate and then make decisions about the project going forward. The idea being we don't ultimately know what the users are going to want, but based on what we think is a good 1.0, that's going to tell us what we should include in the user experience and in the user interface, and what we shouldn't. So the MVP is going to drive what the user is going to experience and what they're going to see. We've seen clients come to us too, which they'll have maybe some drawings they've done on napkins, or all the way to high fidelity designs that they had a designer put together, and it's got all these cool elements on it. And we'll bring it back to, okay, what is the MVP going to be? What are we trying to accomplish with this as far as getting feedback from users? And okay, do we need this?
Yeah. Is this the story that you're trying to tell?
Exactly. Yeah.
And if it's not, then we don't need it.
Cut out the noise.
Cut out the noise.
Yeah. And we don't expect clients to do that on their own. We ask them questions in our very early engagement to help focus them on where they need to go. So we help hold your hand during that. It's not like we expect you as the client to come in and understand user experience and understand how to plan an MVP. We can hold your hand through all that process and make sure that you're starting down the right path. And I think that's that's an area where we really excel at Bixley, is helping guide you as to how your project's going to be successful and help pulling your success criteria out of you, because ultimately you know your business, you know your clients, you know your industry, and we're going to help you bring that into the light and just help make your project a glowing success. There's lots of different flavors of MVP. So the MVP, again, just to circle back, is to gather user feedback so we know which direction to ultimately take the project, under the idea that it's impossible, if you're building something new in particular, to know ultimately where you're going or what your customers need. We're building innovative things. Our clients are building innovative things. They're not just cloning something out there and saying, I exactly 100% want this exact same thing. So two really common ones I see are, we can build a minimum version of your app, whether it's a mobile app or a web app, it doesn't matter. It usually takes about 3 months to do that. And that's working with you to really refine down the features that need to be in there. So we can help people do that for a startup size budget that doesn't necessarily require investor capital. So that's the MVP where you actually build the app. The other MVP that we see a lot is where we don't even build anything. We still work with the client to understand what functionality or what feedback we want to gather in the MVP, but instead we'll do essentially drawings. So wireframes that are, kind of like pencil sketch through a software program like Figma or Sketch or something like that, or even high fidelity designs where it actually looks exactly like what the app would look like. But that way it requires less imagination for people, and whether you're going to investors or you're going to end users, but you're not even spending that 3 months, you're spending more like a month to just kind of get things down on paper. And again, somewhat relying on their imagination, but also giving them something tangible. And then it also provokes them to think in terms of, oh yeah, but how am I going to gather this? Or there's no, this doesn't tie back to that. So those are two really good ways, kind of either the 1 month flavor or the 3 month flavor, depending on how interactive you need your MVP to be.
And I think you're dealing a lot with the maybe the 2 month or the 3 month MVP if you're trying to physically put this in front of your end users and have them like play around with it in the real world. You still can do that with users, but the maybe 1 month MVP that click through the kind of Figma designs or something in Sketch, we get clients all the time that say, oh, I need to build this MVP because I'm going to go get some investment money. Investors don't care if the actual application works. They want to see, what does it look like? What does it feel like? What am I writing a check for? And if you have a really nice high fidelity design that you can click through, well, the clients are like, this looks amazing. I want this. Build it right now. I'll give you all the money. And so an MVP might actually mean gathering from your end users. It might also mean I just need to go get a check from somebody.
Right.
So, there's options. And the good thing is you don't have to do one or the other.
And an MVP is really a good fit for pretty much everyone.
Yes.
We strongly encourage clients to do that. The reason for this is because we want them to not overbuild initially. We want our clients to be successful. So kind of the overarching theme here that you're hearing when it comes to MVPs is you should be able to get an MVP in around 3 months. There's no reason to spend 6 months or a year building out everything you think needs to be in there, because chances are when you do that and you get it in front of your users, they're not going to value things that you maybe spent 2 months on this feature. They're not going to use this other thing. And then the thing that you didn't spend much time on is the thing they really care about. Or maybe there's a subsection of your app that delivers huge value to them. And that's really what they care about. But you spent, 20% of your budget on that. So we want clients to have, A, we want them to be successful, and B, we don't want to use all their budget in the first round, because it's pretty much a certainty that your first pass at this is going to be your worst pass because you have the least amount of information. So it makes sense to do a minimal investment, again, that minimum viable product, and then save some of your budget, save some of your time frame, gather that user feedback, and iterate based off that. And Bixley as a team, we're here long term to help you do that. So we can help you build that MVP, and then if you need a team for another 6 months or 6 years to keep that project going afterwards and really build it out the next 95%, we're totally there to help you with that too.
And stepping it back even a little bit from the MVP, the goal should always be that you've validated the market.
Yes.
And you know that you actually want to have this built, and then that people actually want to have this built and are going to use it, and you can monetize it and all the things that go along with validating the market. But we know also that that is not the case. And so it's important to push towards MVP and know that you might have sort of felt the market out a little bit,
right,
but don't go develop for like 2 years and then throw something out to the market. Just build for a month or two, also continue to validate the market, get the MVP out there, and then get the feedback.
And that's the point, that you don't know what your users are going to value.
Exactly.
And we never want to have a case with a client where they came to us, they told us build XYZ, we built XYZ, and then they're just not successful because they didn't validate the idea, and we can just be like, well, we built what you said, So it's important to us that basically clients are successful. And so we want to help you validate those ideas, and that's what the MVP does.
We had a project, we still have a product, it's called Overflow. Overflow was very interesting. What it was allowing us to do was take ordering at bars and venues where you normally would be dealing with large traffic and having to fight through and take physical orders and all that kind of stuff and pay with credit cards and tabs and just all this terrible stuff that bartenders have to do that is not bartending, which is what they're actually really, really good at. So we came up with the idea of, what if as a user, I can just order a drink from my phone, I can pay for it from my phone. And much like Uber or Lyft or really any application nowadays, you can just get an alert that says, your drink's ready, go pick it up at a bar. So we had all these ideas. We're like, that sounds really, really cool. We should do this. So what a lot of people would have done, and what we even unfortunately started to do at the beginning of it, was just go build the application. Then we said, wait a minute, hang on now. We think we want this. So let's actually go make sure that other people want it. So we did what we referred to as the human MVP. And the human MVP was us going to bars, setting a whiteboard up on the bar, top table. The bartender was there and we said, okay, here's the deal. We're going to actually simulate like you got an order digitally and it showed up here on the screen. I'm going to rove around with a couple sales reps. We're going to basically be the iPhones in this scenario, and we're going to go just take orders from people manually. And we're going to see if they, will just order from somebody. We know they'll obviously order from a waiter or waitress, but like, are they going to order from this other person that says, also, by the way, you can pay with your phone? Well, how do I do that? Well, we just leveraged a third-party application that accepted payments and shot it over to the bar. But we basically put orders up, had them actually, the customer that is, actually order from their phone using a third-party kind of payment service. We then manually walked over, wrote it up on a whiteboard. It simulated them receiving a digital order. They built it. They said, hey, it's ready. And we said, oh, the bartender says your drink's ready. Why don't you go pick your drink up, customer? They walked up, they picked up the drink, they walked away, and suddenly they realized, which we had hoped to validate through the whole process, that they didn't really have to stop their conversations with their friends. They paid for their whole drink with their phone and had very little interruption. The bartender didn't have to worry about even taking their order, so they just continued to bartend. And then the drink got made, it got delivered successfully, and everyone was happy. And we basically simulated building an MVP type app that would have been a phone app that actually took orders, payments, all that kind of stuff, but we just did it physically with people. And it was a really neat process. It was super fun, and we were able to see a lot of rubs in the process of people being like, I like that, I don't like that, both on the bartenders and the customer side. So it was fun, and it doesn't work for every application, obviously, but if there's real world scenarios that you can run to validate the process and the flow of your application and that MVP that you're going to build, I highly recommend that you do that.
Thank you everyone for joining us for this episode of Bixley Tech Tuesday. I hope you enjoyed this conversation about MVPs and getting UX feedback from your actual end users. If you have any additional questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. And if you have an idea about an app that you'd like to start verifying and exploring, check out our website, bixley.com. You can contact us directly there and even set up a free consultation on your app idea.